try to channel the spirit of those emotions out of this plastic shell, essentially, which I'm not spooked of at all. It's just, it's a doll. It's an object that's made in our image. For the life of me, I don't understand what's creepy about that. My effort is to create as true to life rendition of that object in hopes that somehow the stuff that was contained inside will just come out, for anybody to see.
To touch on the boxes and the sculptural elements there, these as well have these backstories that you've that are attached to them. What's your philosophy with presenting those works?
As objects, they appeal to me much the same way as the dolls, in that they are discarded objects. All the dolls had been thrown away. All these boxes I got in the recycling bin, and in that way, I think they're very connected. In both instances, my feeling is that these are objects that nobody else wanted, nobody else cared about, and by sort of making such a concerted effort to replicate them, my hope is that they are then elevated to the status of art. Once they're not themselves anymore, or sometimes even if they're recontextualized and placed in a pristine gallery, suddenly have a different meaning, and that's my hope, sort of thematically. In terms of the provenances that you're referring to, they sort of were percolating in my head as I was making the pieces, but I didn't really formally entertain the idea of pursuing them as part of the art statement until I was already well on my way toward crafting a lot of them. And I think the underlying concept is that they shed light on certain aspects of society that I want to comment on. For example, each of the boxes have, or had, and because we ran into intellectual property rights issues, a story that connected to them to some celebrity or historical or cultural event or some act of notoriety. And my idea was that while looking at just the objects themselves, people would think that this is an object or a depiction of object that has no intrinsic value in and of itself. Once they read the provenance and see, wow, Woody Allen, touched that bag, or Marilyn Monroe, drank out of that cup, they immediately assign worth, and then we as a society assign a monetary worth to that piece. I think it's quite bizarre. A baseball costs $5, but if Mark McGwire hit it as his 70th home run, then it's worth $3 million. And it sort of comments on what I perceive as our misplaced emphasis on celebrity and, for lack of a single word, things that are not so important.
The saga of Michael Glass at the Fine Arts Center began about a year ago, and my wife Una and I were in Miami Beach at Art Basel. We were in one of the exhibitions and saw some really great realistic painting that was pretty strange. And a couple of those pieces are here in this show, including the bouquet of gloves and several of the doll paintings. But what really engaged us is we turned the corner into another room and we saw the things that are surrounding us, these cardboard boxes that were made out of wood, but I didn't know that at the time. So I was wandering around with Una, taking the measure of what this work was, and then Una found on the wall around the corner an article from a Miami newspaper that had come out that day and explained that these were wood objects that Michael created fake provenances for. And that gave a whole new dimension to what we were looking at. The first thing I look for in art is uniqueness and integrity from the art or the artist. And this is what struck me about Michael Glass. Many artists have tremendous craftsmanship capability, Mikel's, both from a painting and from a fabricating of these wooden/cardboard sculptures, has that. But the best artists, and I believe Mikel is one of those and has an opportunity to be very large on an international scale, have an integrity to their art and a measure of creativity that 99.8% of the artists don't have. In my opinion, this art would be edgy, the cardboard collectibles would be edgy if it was in London or New York or Berlin, and we have it here. So this is an opportunity for the community to see what is state-of-the-art conceptual art that they can't find elsewhere. Blake Miltier has been fantastic. I mean, just his recognition of what Mikel is bringing in curating this, and Blake has created a pretty substantial catalog for this show. And we're hopeful that this will travel elsewhere to museums around the country.
I think it's extremely important to do one-person shows of an artist's work, where you can really dig in and really kind of get in their heads, get into their process, see what they do over a period of years. You know, it's great walking into an exhibition where you might have a one-off or two pieces from an artist and you can kind of get a hint at what they do, but when you can really have that access to dive into an artist's work, it's fantastic. And you know, part of what we feel is our charge here is not only getting Colorado Springs out to the world, but bringing the world to Colorado Springs. And so some of the things that Mikel is dealing with are certainly from his own experience growing up in Massachusetts and living in New York, working as an artist. And like I say, a lot of that kind of came to me on the visit to Mikel's studio. And so kind of being immersed for a few days in Mikel's world kind of brought new elements to the show.
So the famous FedEx box, the World on Time, large box. What's the story here?
Well, and sort of gets divided into two stories. One is the craft story, and the other is the underlying idea that is attached to it that makes it something in addition, if not other than what it is.
So tell me the craft story, the process, first of all.
It's a wooden box, I constructed using fairly straightforward carpentry techniques. I made the form first and then painted on it, although there was one step in between, which was to create this very subtle ribbing on it that mimics the actual surface of cardboard. My challenge was to look at a FedEx box that I had in my studio and try to replicate it as precisely and accurately as I could. I couldn't tell you why that was my motivation, just that it's sort of the internal burning passion of mine to make different versions of something that I've set up or something that I see. So there are a lot of technical difficulties that went along with the process. As I mentioned, this ribbing here. In the earlier boxes, I tried to apply that free form and ran into the problem that your eye expects to see it perfect, and anything less than perfect, rather than looking just sort of okay, it looked absolutely terrible. So I had to devise a way of creating that texture mechanically, which became a big technical challenge and basically became a process that making the boxes was predicated on. I had to make tools to actually make components of the boxes in order that I could then put the skin of paint on that would make it identify as what I was trying to mimic to anyone looking at it. Another area where that was the case is these little insets where you can see the open end of the flap. These little strips of corrugation here probably took as much time as large areas of the box elsewhere. And the particular challenge there I had was to take these very thin strips of veneer, which are very thin pieces of wood, and warp it in a way that mimicked the look and feel of corrugated cardboard. and